Statistically, 1 in 5 people on Earth share something in common. They claim a significant descent from a single monolithic group. We are talking about the Han, and their story goes back at least 10,000 years. We found a genetic reset button from 40,000 years ago, and a trail made of jade, millet, and silk, leading to the ancestors of almost a fifth of our species. Let's crack the code of 1.4 billion people. Today we are talking about the largest distinct ethnic group in the world. But here's the thing, origins are never simple. If you look at a map of modern day North China, you'll see the destination, but not necessarily the journey. To figure out where the Han came from, we have to pull together a massive detective case involving multiple lines of evidence, including ancient DNA, linguistics, modern haplogroup analysis, and a small amount of archaeology. In this video, we assess the route the ancestors of the Han took from Africa to reach China, assess how Neolithic farming practices shaped the modern country, and, importantly, shaped its genes, and finally assess the modern Chinese genealogy, including genetic echoes from the Silk Road. The clues we're going to use, they're hidden in everything, from jade stones to the blood of ancient aristocrats. First, we need to zoom way back. We know East Asia has been a hotbed of hominin activity for a very long time. Homo erectus, for example, arrived in modern-day China between 1.7 and 1.6 million years ago, and even earlier waves of Homo sapien wandered through the area before the Toba eruption around 74,000 years ago. And if you want to know a bit more about that, do check out my video on ancient hominins of East Asia and Southeast Asia, but after this one. With respect to those ancient waves out of Africa, if you are alive today with significant East Asian ancestry, you probably aren't descended from those first waves. The genetic data points to a massive reset button. The most realistic model is that the modern Han ancestry comes from a specific wave of anatomically modern humans who walked out of Africa and entered Southeast Asia around 60,000 years ago, and finally pushed onto the mainland of China around 40,000 years ago. How are we so sure of that? We have a very specific biomarker. It's a mutation called M168T. Every modern East Asian man carries this marker on their Y-chromosome. It originated in Africa. So, despite some inevitable small-scale admixture with older archaic hominins, the out-of-Africa model stands firm, and there's not enough information or data to doubt the out-of-Africa model. No matter what you've been taught, the genetic bedrock of China and all humans is Africa. Anatomically modern humans, which we can claim descent from, have been in China from about 40,000 years. But when did they become the Han specifically? Well, between 12,000 and 5,300 years ago, we see a shift. We can try and examine this shift using ancient cultures, or what we know of ancient cultures from archaeology. For example, the Han are famous for their reverence of jade.
The ancient Chinese didn't have diamonds, but they did have jade as a symbol of imperial authority and sacred power. And it becomes one of the symbols of imperial authority, to the extent that the word in Chinese for jade is a picture of a king holding a precious jewel.
We have found jade artifacts in Jianongshan, site in Heilongjiang, dating back 9,000 years ago. I'm probably going to butcher some of these names. I'm sorry about that. Does that mean the Han came from the northeast? Maybe, but that's a pretty weak thread. Jade could have been traded, or the culture could have been imported. How about linguistics? We know that the Han predominantly spoke a Sino-Tibetan language that again probably originated from the northeast area. But that's again a little bit harder to trace back. We need DNA. Now, there was a specific paper that I'm showing here that argued the best way of tracing back the Han lineage is through non-recombinant Y-chromosome variants, or NRY. The logic is that China has historically been a patriarchal society, so the male line, the Y chromosome, should preserve the ancient population structure. Honestly, I'm a bit skeptical of that. I feel autosomal DNA, the DNA you get from both parents, gives a fuller picture, mainly because there's more of it. I feel the more data there is, the more information we have to analyze. But you can still find interesting patterns from uniparental markers like non-recombinant Y chromosome lineage. And as it turns out, the NRY lineage of most Chinese men today are O2a-M324. This is the dominant lineage of men in modern-day China, and it originated in northeastern China. Genetics is probably the most important part of the story in my opinion, but I'm a geneticist. The other part of the story that is also very important is calories. Around 10,000 years ago, the world warmed up. Hunter-gatherers realized they didn't have to chase food and they could make it grow. This created a massive north-south divide that defined Neolithic China. In the north, it was the age of millet. The oldest millet farming site we have dates roughly to 8,200 years ago at the Chishan site. These people also domesticated pigs and dogs, by the way. I made a whole video on dog domestication and the evolution of the first wolves into dogs. Check it out later. During the age of the millet, the population exploded. Linguists believe that the Sino-Tibetan language family, which includes the Sinitic language spoken by the Han today, originated in northern China around 7,200 years ago. From the Chishan, culture flew outwards like a river. It evolved into the Yangshou culture between 7,000 and 5,300 years ago. These guys are known as the progenitors of major pre-Chinese cultures and societies, including the Maiyao culture, the Qiji culture, and the Hongshan culture. Now, the Hongshan are quite interesting. Remember that genetic marker I mentioned earlier, O2a-M324? It is prevalent in aristocrats of the Hongshan period. This strongly suggests that the Han paternal line comes from these northern millet farmers, or more specifically, the aristocrats during the time of this northern millet farming age. Meanwhile, in the south, it was a totally different world. They weren't farming millet, they were farming rice. Domesticated rice in the south goes back over 10,000 years, birthing the Gao Mayo culture between 7,800 and 6,500 years ago, and the Daxi culture between 6,500 and 5,300 years ago. So, what is China? It's a 5,000-year-long collision and assimilation of these two worlds, the northern millet farmers and the southern rice farmers. This ancient north-south divide is quite interesting, but did it survive to the modern day? To answer that, scientists ran a massive SNP study, that single nucleotide polymorphisms. They analyzed over 100,000 SNPs from 8,200 samples across 23 different provinces. They also included individuals from Beijing, Shanghai, and Singapore. The results? This north-south divide in China is real. On principal component 1, the biggest genetic difference between the Chinese people is not east versus west, it's north versus south. But look closer at the south. We see a second layer of variance. Distinct ethnic groups like the Hakka, Cantonese, and Teochew people in the Guangdong province show a second layer of separation. This suggests that language acted as a barrier, reserving specific genetic signatures. When we model ancestral components, using Japanese samples as a control or an outgroup, we see a gradient. a yellow component, which is constant everywhere, a brown component, which increases as you go south, and a green-brown component, which increases as you go north. Therefore, the Neolithic farming revolution of China persists in the DNA of the modern population. The North Chinese are more likely to have inherited variants from millet farmers, and the South Chinese are more likely to have inherited variants from rice farmers. This constant yellow variants are likely ancient variants that all Chinese inherited from a wave of migration out of Africa that hit China around 40,000 years ago and survives to this day. During my research, I found a paper from 2006, but wow, this was a very interesting manuscript. The researchers assessed haplogroups from different ethnic groups within China. While the Han make up over 90% of the Chinese populace, it is, in my humble opinion, that it's just as important to understand the differences found within minority groups. When we look into the paternal lines, the Y-chromosome, versus the maternal lines through the mitochondrial DNA, we see some conflicts. The paternal lines show a history of conquest and trade. Most of China is haplogroup O, specifically a subgroup O3. But there are outliers. Tibetans have a high frequency of haplogroup D. The Kukong, or forest people, have a unique signature of a high frequency of haplogroup F star. Newer Muslim populations, like the Hui, we see a high frequency of haplogroup C. This is common in Mongolia and Korea. We also see haplogroups R1A1 and P in very high frequencies. R1A1 is quite famous. It's common in the Middle East and Central Asia. Finding it here is a genetic echo of the Silk Road. It tells us that male traders from the West came into China, settled down, married, and reproduced with local Han women. How do we know they married local Han women? That's what the maternal DNA tells us, which is a completely different story. Mitochondrial DNA is passed only from mother to child. The Han, Hui, Sala, and Tibetans, despite having completely distinct histories and religions, all share maternal haplogroup D. So while the boys were moving around fighting and trading, the women tended to be the stable foundation of the population structure. Haplogroup A is found in high frequencies in the Dongxiang. Haplogroups B, F, and R star are common in the Kugong and Miao. And haplogroup R star is very interesting. It's also highly frequent in the Middle East. So, while rare, some women were moving along the Silk Road as well. The Kugong and Bon I found particularly to be standout populations. They were the most genetically distinct groups within this dataset, possibly due to their high frequencies of haplogroup C and A. The abundance of haplogroup C and A could be an ancient relic, or it could be more recent admixture. That can only be figured out through more data. So what is the Han identity? It is a history stretching back over 10,000 years. It flows from local hunter-gatherers to the Chishan millet farmers, through the aristocrats of the Hongshan culture, and eventually merging with rice farmers from the south. And when we sequence the DNA of people living today, we don't just see a flat map. We see echoes of ancient linguistic tribes, religious migrations, and the footsteps of traders on the Silk Road. Sorry, that was my cat being very naughty and trying to steal my tea. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, as it really helps, and we'll continue to decipher our species' amazing past. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time for more science.